Good afternoon, Father. Good afternoon, brothers. Welcome to our humble home here at Caritan Norte, Tuguegarao City. And I'll be discussing ecology in the teaching of Pope Francis. The teaching of Pope Francis on ecology draws from his first encyclical letter, Laudato Si. And in this document, we have seen a very comprehensive study on ecology. We thank our present Pope, Pope Francis, for giving us a comprehensive view and understanding of ecology. This is very unusual because this is the first time that an encyclical would talk about ecology in a very broad manner. And here in Laudato Si, Pope Francis had a dialogue to each and every one of us in order for us to have a clear understanding on the teaching of Pope Francis. First, we would move to the C part. The C part would tell us that Pope Francis had been inspired from Vatican II. It is reading the signs of times. And in the C part, Pope Francis has enumerated several problems our environment is facing now. First, what is happening to our common home? The title of this document would tell us of the very purpose of this encyclical, Laudato Si, encyclical letter of Pope Francis on care for our common home. And so Pope Francis would try to tell us or would try to present to us the realities of what is happening to our common home. First that he presented is the problem on pollution, which he believes is part of our daily lives. The second that he pointed out is climate change, which has a grave global implication. So this climate change has a global effect. The third is the throwaway culture, which Pope Francis would tell us that in this culture, we are just showing our irresponsible use and abuse of our goods. The third is the issue on water, that there is already a decrease on the sources of drinking water. The second problem that he pointed out is the loss of biodiversity. There is a extinction of both animals and plants, which are very essential in the harmony and biodiversity, in the equilibrium of our environment. Next is there is a decline in the quality of human life and the breakdown of society. Pope Francis is presenting us that there are many cities with many or overpopulation. It means that there is already a disproportionate ratio between the area of cities and the number of people there, and thus the quality of human life, people living on those cities, is affected. Next problem that he presented is the problem on global inequality. We know the fact that we have rich countries and there are also poor countries, and there is indeed a global inequality. But Pope Francis is telling us now that in terms of ecological problem and ecological crisis, we need to be equal because we are in our common home. Pope Francis opened our eyes on the reality that there is a weak international political response in our problem with our ecology. He has been mentioning, or he has been telling us through this document, that there is a very low response internationally and globally from our nations, from the different leaders of all nations. Pope Francis, on the first part of the document, would tell us that there is this violence in our hearts wounded by sin. And this violence in our hearts would talk about our irresponsible use and abuse of the common goods that we have. There is a irresponsible use of the environment that we are not taking care of our environment. The next thing that we need to look on the C part is on the theological and scriptural foundation of the document. And here, Pope Francis presents to us the gospel of creation. In the gospel of creation, Pope Francis has reminded us that there are three most essential relationships that had been manifesting since then. Our relationship with God, our relationship with our neighbor, and our relationship with our Mother Earth. But looking at it, what is just emphasized is our relationship to God and our relationship with our neighbor. We forgotten our relationship with the earth, and that is the reason why Pope Francis has written and presented to us and reminded us that we too have our relationship with the earth. There is a problem with this relationship with God, with neighbor, and with earth. And Pope Francis opened our eyes that there is a rupture of this harmony of relationship because we are also but creatures, but we presume to take place God and refuse to acknowledge our creaturely limitations. And so there is already a rupture on our relationship with God, on our neighbor, and most especially with the earth. And so in this encyclical, Pope Francis is giving us another view or another perspective in view of our being creatures, in view of our being commanded to have dominion over all the earth. We know the fact that in the book of Genesis, God, the Creator, had given man the dominion over the earth. And now Pope Francis is giving us a positive outlook and a positive perspective of having this dominion, of having this power over the earth. And this is to till, to keep, and to be stewards of this creation. And in the Laudato Si, in this encyclical, Pope Francis has been mentioning the word care. So we can now see the shift from dominion to care. And to care means to till, to keep, and to be stewards of creation. And now, Pope Francis is giving us distinction between creation and nature. He mentioned that creation has to do with God's loving plan in which every creature has its own value and significance. Creation can only be understood as a gift from the outstretched hand of the Father of all, and a reality illuminated by the love which calls us together into universal communion. And now, Pope Francis is telling us that nature is a system which can be studied, understood, and controlled. We go back to the word universal communion. This is very important in the encyclical because this covers the primary teaching of Pope Francis on ecology, which we will be discussing on the latter part of this report. As part of the universe, called into being one with the Father, all of us are linked by unseen bonds and together form a kind of universal family, a sublime communion which fills us with a sacred, affectionate, and humble respect. This notion of universal communion is very important in the teaching of Pope Francis as regards ecology, and we will be looking at that on the later part of this report. Now, after looking on the Gospel of Creation, Pope Francis brings us to the reality of the human roots of ecological crisis. And Pope Francis is primarily addressing this to the dominant technocratic paradigm and the place of human beings and of human action in the world. Pope Francis is not telling us that technology is bad to our environment. What he is advocating is to have a comprehensive evaluation of this technological paradigm. We should look at the strengths and weaknesses in terms of what they can contribute to the good of society and how they can also be harmful. So Pope Francis is telling us now that we need to look upon totally the benefits and the harmful effects of technology and other technological advancement. It is not good that we progress and we develop, but we try to destroy, or the consequences would to destroy the environment. So Pope Francis is telling us now that there should be a comprehensive evaluation of this technological advancement, knowing on the good that they can give to the society and also the harmful effects. There is also a problem on misguided anthropocentrism. This calls now, or this points out to the ecological crisis, the human roots of ecological crisis, the misguided anthropocentrism. This misguided anthropocentrism is a practical relativism that sees everything as irrelevant unless it serves one's own immediate interests. And this is the problem now with our technological advancement, because we are just drawing within us, we are just after our own benefits, and we neglect our environment.